flavour.
On ABC Radio Darwin and on the ABC Listen app.
So today, I need your help. If you're a business, I want to know how you're going applying for the federal government's JobKeeper payment. $1,500 a fortnight for every employee. How are you keeping them and paying them while you wait to see if the federal government approves your application? And how do you feel about the inequity in the office, for example? You've got a hard-working manager who will get paid $1,500 a fortnight. It'll be a big pay cut. But now even the one-day-a-week employee who just comes in and out to help with housekeeping also gets $1,500 a fortnight. So will the people who are on unpaid maternity leave. How is that fair? Edward Mallett is the CEO of Employsure, National Advisors on Workplace Relations. Edward, we've heard of a case here in Darwin this week where an employer had to go to the bank to actually borrow money to bankroll the $1,500 per fortnight to pay his many employees while he waited for the federal government to process his application. That just seems extraordinary.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, it does seem extraordinary. It's not unusual, unfortunately. We're seeing a lot of employers who are caught in that cash flow gap at the moment. Some people are saying that they're ending up being a clearinghouse for a government subsidy or a social security to their staff. And to be frank, those businesses that are being forced into getting loans because their cash flow is so tight are exactly the sort of businesses that really shouldn't be going out and getting loans at this tight time.
Yeah, and that obviously will cost them more money because they're getting bank loans.
Exactly. And there's going to be interest on that, whether or not those loans are backed by the government and all the other schemes that people aren't giving out money for free. So they've got to be very careful that they don't end up with big loans that they can't afford to pay off in due course.
It's a huge risk.
It is. And it's frustrating for businesses. A lot of them have now applied and they're now waiting. We're right in the middle of that gap at the moment to see whether they're going to get paid by the government. And when you apply online, you actually don't get any notification from the government to say that you have or haven't been approved. So you're left then having to back pay your employees, which needs to be done by the 8th of May for the first couple of fortnights. You end up back paying your employees without knowing whether you're ever going to get that money back from the government.
So can you explain the problem with the system which leads to this? Is it just slow to process applications?
The government was always very wary of entering into a process that it couldn't administrate. They really didn't want to start a system that they couldn't practically put into place. So they're just doing this through payroll. So first and foremost, the businesses have to pay their staff this, and then they're going to recoup it from the government. So I understand why they're doing it. It's probably it's not ideal, but it's probably the best of a series of bad systems that we're seeing around the world at the moment.
Wonder if you've been having the same dramas, trying to keep those employees on and keep paying them before you have the JobKeeper payment. To hear where it's at your business, 1300 057 222. Meanwhile, the inequity between staff is becoming an issue too. Can you lay out a couple of real-life case studies of how that's played out?
Yeah, the classic situation is this, is where you've got an employee who might be earning more than $1,500 a fortnight, but they have been stood down or had their hours reduced, so they're down at that $1,500 a fortnight level, versus another employee who might have just been doing a couple of hours a week, and they're essentially getting a pay rise up to the $1,500 a fortnight at the moment, which is causing some problems in small business where they're having to manage that discussion in their workplaces. And
what's your suggestion on how people deal with that?
I'm telling people to be upfront, communicate as much as possible. If you look even at our political leaders in this time, the people that are doing best are those that are talking a lot. And that's the same for employers as well. They should be being very open with their employees, showing them what the government is doing, showing the fact sheets online and things like that, just so they don't end up with sort of conspiracies and sensitive unfairness, when really the employer is just implementing a policy that's out of their hands.
There are a couple of issues I want to get to, but I want to get back to the application for the JobKeeper program in the first place. How likely is it that businesses will be forking out $1,500 a fortnight per employee and then find that their applications have been knocked back? How real a risk is that?
I think realistically it's a low likelihood. I think the government will take a pretty broad and practical approach to the first couple of fortnights. They'll then have time to start assessing whether there are businesses that have applied and they've paid that they shouldn't have paid, either because they're not quite there in terms of their downturn test that the government has for this, or because they're trying to, I suppose, stretch the boundaries of the subsidy to make sure they qualify. I think those sort of stories will come out over the coming months, but in the short term, I think the government will take a pretty broad brush approach and pay most businesses. I think the bigger issue is that the government's meant to pay this by the 14th of May, the first instalment of it. Will they actually be able to coordinate that? It's going to be a big task. There's about 1 million employing businesses in the whole of Australia, and something like 8 out of 10 of those have applied for this. So there's a lot of people that are waiting for that money. Is the government going to be able to actually deliver by the 14th of May?
You're on ABC Radio Darwin. Adam Steer with you. Edward Mallett is the CEO of Employsure, a national advisors on workplace relations. Another common concern is for the self-employed sole contractors who also have a second very part-time job, which now rules them ineligible. So the scenario being sole contractor Jenny also has a 2-day-a-week job as a teacher, but her primary income from her business has dropped 80%. Because she's part-time in that other job and not a casual, she's ruled out of the JobKeeper.
That's right. On the face of the rules, we're hearing this quite a lot from small businesses and from sole traders. To be honest, I think that's a gap in the rules. That it's when they've rushed through the system, I think they've ended up inadvertently making a couple of mistakes like that. So there's an element of this where those gaps, I think, will get filled over the coming months, and hopefully those individual circumstances will get onto the government's radar, and they'll start to understand the unfairness of someone having a secondary job, meaning that they're cancelled out from claiming JobKeeper. But the basic principle is you can only get JobKeeper from one place. And that seems to be the intent of the rule.
To be fair to the government, they rolled out this program very quickly when the COVID crisis first hit, so inevitably there are going to be some speed bumps along the way.
Absolutely, and and too, they've been pretty entrepreneurial and business-minded about it. We've used the metaphor of them having jumped off the cliff and then they're building the plane on the way down, and good on them for doing that. But you do get these oddities. One of the things they've just filled in has been this idea that 16 and 17-year-olds who are living at home and maybe earning $100 a week in a part-time job and they're in full-time education were getting essentially a boon up to $1,500 a fortnight. And they've just changed that rule to stop the employers having that imposition on them, and also the teenagers doing so well out of it.
You're hosting a daily live stream on these issues. What are some of the other common problems working through this that you're hearing?
There are a couple of classic problems. We've covered the main one, which is will I get paid and when. But what we're starting to see creep in is the cultural challenges where people are saying, no, you know what, I'm now at home, I'm having to deal with home education for my kids. You're asking me to come back into work, I can't do it. And they're saying, well, what do I do with that? I'm applying for JobKeeper, I'm paying you JobKeeper, what are my rights in terms of getting you back to work? That's a fairly classic one for us at the moment, and what the conflicting position of an employee and employer is on that.
So if you're on JobKeeper and you want to stay home, are you allowed to or not, or do you have to come to work?
So typically, if you're on JobKeeper, you'll have an underlying agreement that you would have been full-time, part-time, or had some regular casual hours. And the employer is quite within their rights to ask you to come and do those hours, subject to them having to run a safe workplace and things like that. And if you're saying no to that, then that could escalate into something like a disciplinary issue. Depending on how the employer feels about it, they may take a softer approach and agree that with you. But you do have an underlying contract or agreement in place that means that you should be turning up to work if you're asked to do so.
Edward Mallett, good to talk to you this morning. Appreciate your time, mate. Are you on JobKeeper payments and have been asked to come to work but you want to stay home? Love to hear from you. 1300 057 222.